Okay, I'm on. Good morning. This is such an exciting time of life. I mean, I'm in the middle of my 60s, little on the upper side. I've got to see a lot of things. I've got to live a lot of things. I've got to experience a lot of things. I'm going to talk to you about something I have no experience with for the next few moments. After that, then we'll talk shop, okay? But can you see that? It says open range. How many of you know even what that means, open range? All right, how many of you seen large herds of cattle out in the middle of nowhere with no fences? All right, well, at least we're on the same page for a little while. Through my discovery time, I found out that my great-great-grandfather, Abe Lorenz, ended up owning a ranch in Wyoming of 75,000 acres. And he owned ranches and farms in northern Colorado as well. My grandfather had a little short 80-acre farm right there. I was pretty impressed. He came in 1880 or so. By 1914, he had bought the ranch and grew his cattle farm into something that was quite formidable in those days and times. I do not know if he was one of those cattle barons. If you know what I mean by that, they shot sheep herders and they didn't like barbed wire. But that's the idea of open range. Let me just share with you what kind of man helped on the open range, the kind of cowboy that it took to herd cattle all the way from Texas up to Nebraska, all the way from Wyoming to Kansas City. James Shaw said in 1984, any man who is not afraid of work and who can ride a horse and possess a good common sense can get along well enough. A man doesn't have to throw a lasso like a vaquero, nor shoot a revolver like a 10-cent novel Texas Ranger to be a good cowboy. But he must have good nerve, not be afraid of getting tired once in a while, and he must stick to his knitting, rain or shine. You might not understand the idea of sticking to your knitting, but what it means is you finish the project. You keep on till you're done. These are a couple of guys. The little guy is called Billy the Bear. And I kind of got a kick out of seeing his picture there. They probably call him that because he was a little bit shorter than the rest of them, but quite the cowboy. The Bartlett Ranch in Wyoming still exists, and this is the early ages of that ranch, 1882. I just wanted you to see what they were dressed like, the chaps that they wore, the kind of folk that they were. They were all men, and when they were out on taking care of the herd, they ate from a chuck wagon, and here's a bunch of guys in Wyoming eating out of the back end of a chuck wagon. Those were quite special, the wagons, the way they were fixed, the way they were made, and how they took care of the men that were on the trail. Here's a little something about sleep. Sleep itself was a premium because controlling the cattle day and night took precedence. A cowboy on an 1876 trail drive from Texas told a newspaper correspondent, "It is 17 months since I have slept under shelter or been inside of a house." Another hand, working in the Nebraska Roundup the same year, mentioned this, that he hadn't had sleep for 3 nights. And upon inquiry, his reply was, "Last night, tonight, and tomorrow." There was hardly any sleeping on the trail. They slept in the rain, they slept in the snow, they had minimum clothing, a coat, a second pair of trousers, and it was quite the ordeal to be an open range cowboy. But what I'm calling you to is to think of yourself as an open range Christian, and I'll get to that presently. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, which you have listened to, but let's hear it here. Paul says to Timothy, "For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am sure that it is in you as well." Verse 6, "And for this reason I remind you to kindle afresh the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands." Okay, and so let's look at this just a little bit, and I want us to take the encouragement that Paul gives to Timothy. I want you to be encouraged with it as well. Paul reminded Timothy of how God had intertwined his life with his parents, with his grandmother, with his mom, and that through that intertwining, it was where faith was created. And so we all have a story of how our faith was created. For Timothy, it was through his parents. And then he reminded Timothy that he was given a gift. If you read Romans chapter 12, if you read 1 Corinthians chapter 12, you're going to know that gifts have been given, not just the miraculous ones, but also gifts have been given to men. Ephesians chapter 4, when Jesus took off for heaven, he gave gifts to men. That's what it says. And so I'm going to challenge you today to look for your gift. If you haven't found it yet, it's your job to know what it is. Okay, I'm going to take a parenthesis here. 2 weeks ago, I went to a thing called Bible camp. I could put it in other terms like terror. Okay, children don't speak my language for some reason, and I don't know that I really speak theirs either. There's quite a disconnect between me and little ones. Unless I can call them sweetheart, I'm in trouble, okay? I've got 7 granddaughters. I'm getting used to that idea, all right? But children, I'm going to just say that is the least of my gifts, to deal with children. And so for the last 20 years, 1 week of every year, I give it a shot. I go and I try to teach those little ones. I try to talk to those little ones. And I've got to tell you, this last time was a big success. There's a whole row of kids that I'm getting hugs from right now, today, because we were in camp together. So even at my smallest gift level, God has blessed me with a relationship with those children. Paul reminds Timothy that he has a gift and that he needs to fan it into flame. He encourages Timothy that it's his responsibility to take that gift, whatever it is, and put it into play. He's not saying, oh, you have a gift, so, just hold on to it for a while. God will show you eventually what you need to do. Maybe God will. But the fact is, Timothy already knows what his gift is. And Timothy evidently is being timid about the gift that he has been given. And so Paul's trying to encourage him to take on the responsibility of the gift given and then fan it into flame. Now think about the gift that you have received, or the gifts. You could be a 5-talent person. Think about those gifts and think about fanning them into flame while we're speaking this morning. Paul gave Timothy a purpose. Look at chapter 2, verse 2. He says, "And the things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful men who will also be able to teach others." Okay, in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2 is where we find the purpose for Paul having written to Timothy the second time. And he says your gift has something to do with teaching others, but not just teaching them, mentoring them, getting them ready to be able to teach others also. That takes a little bit. It's a little bit more complex than just standing up, preaching and teaching. It takes time to build relationship once again. It takes time to build rapport. Lots of people thought Timothy was real young, and so some people weren't listening very well to Timothy. And in the first letter, Paul says, don't let your age be a factor in this. Encourage your older men, encourage the younger men, encourage the congregation. Paul says, you've got a gift, you need to put it into practice. All right? Paul also emphasizes this. I guess this is the most exciting thing I've read in the last 2 or 3 years. I was reading 2 Timothy, and I was impressed with chapter 1, verse 7, that we have been given a spirit not of timidity, but of power, love, and discipline. And I got all excited about that verse. Oh, I think I might have forgot that. I think I might have let it go. I've got a spirit of power, love, and discipline. Well, that got me all excited. And then I read chapter 2 after verse 2. Let's read there. He says, verse 3, suffer hardship with me as a good soldier. No soldier in active service entangles himself in affairs of everyday life so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. Now, I don't know about you, but when a soldier walks into the room, the air changes. When Herschel walked into my life, full bird colonel, my life changed. I learned some things that I didn't know before because he is single-hearted on a lot of things, some issues maybe, but his single-heartedness made him into a great soldier. And Herschel has made me into a better follower of Jesus by his example. Herschel has given me a glimpse of what it is to be a soldier, to be single-minded, and to set your heart on the things that your superior has told you. We need to be looking at ourselves as soldiers. Out of power, love, and discipline, which one would this be? God has given us a spirit of power, love, and discipline. Which one would this be, soldier? It'd be power, wouldn't it? That God has given us a spirit of power, and Paul says to Timothy, and the writing says to us, that we must put our mind into a direction, and that we need to be single-minded about what it is that we're going to do for Jesus. We've got to gather up those gifts that he's given us and get on the trail, to get started doing what God has called us to do. Get your gift and act like a soldier about it. Single-minded. That's what Paul said to Timothy. Be a good soldier in the midst of hardship, in the midst of suffering. But then he said it one more time. Look at chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. Now this is where the idea of a spirit of discipline, of power, love, and discipline hit me the hardest. Hadn't read these three passages together before. Had read all of those passages. It just didn't dawn on me. Starting in verse 6. For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. What does Paul say? I have fought the good fight, power. I have finished the course, faith. discipline. And there is now, therefore, laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but to all who have loved his appearing. And all of a sudden, I got a full picture of what it is. We're not just supposed to be a soldier. Timothy wasn't called just to be a soldier, but he was also called to treat his ministry as if he was an athlete. It means that you're participating according to the rules, that you are participating not because somebody told you to, like it is in the soldier situation, but now it's your pleasure to work out. It's your pleasure to participate. It's your pleasure to get ready for the race. That's called discipline. And so Paul is calling Timothy to discipline himself. Maybe he was afraid to get out of the house. Maybe he was a little bit timid about talking to somebody about Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Maybe he was actually going to quit speaking and quit teaching. That's what it seems like here in 2 Timothy, because Paul is pressing him, trying to get him to wake up, to fan into flame the gift that he has been given. And so God is, through Paul, is encouraging Timothy to have a spirit of power, of love, and of discipline. Of course, we haven't talked about the idea of the farmer yet. Can you be a farmer and not love to farm? Where's Dwayne? Is he still here? Can you be a farmer and not love to farm? He's pointing to his wife. You can be the wife of a farmer and not farm. Okay? Farming takes a lot of work. My grandfather was his short 80 could produce more pickles, more corn, and he had a cow, a milking cow set up as well. But his little short 80 was productive. And what I remember for spending 2 weeks with him at a time is that we would walk out to the field, he would count the rows that have been irrigated, go back, set the pipes to irrigate the next set, and then by the afternoon we'd go unset those and set the third set for the evening. Then we would go milk cows. And God bless my grandfather, he still found time to fish. And he taught me the loving of fishing trout. He would take me and we would it'd just be for a day, but it was the most wonderful thing. Farmers, athletes, and soldiers can still have fun. But they're going to have to be single-minded. They're going to have to be disciplined. They're going to have to love what they do. And Paul says, I have fought the fight. I have finished the race. And now there is a crown left for me, but not for me only, but for everyone who makes this decision. So Paul is writing to Timothy, a preacher, and we have to put it in that setting, that it's for a preacher not to lose heart, not to give up, not to be timid, but to be bold in his presentation, to be constant in his presentation, to practice. Those are all things about a preacher that needs to exist. But congregation, that's true for you as well. Because as Timothy was mentoring his people, what does chapter 2, verse 2 say? He says that he is supposed to teach men so that they will also be able to teach others. What's your job, congregation? What's my job, congregation? It's to teach others. We've got to get back to our purpose. We've got to get back to doing what God tells us. Paul told Timothy to fulfill his ministry, and I'm calling on each one of you personally today to fulfill your ministry. Do not any longer accept the fact that you are here in a good place only. But you are here for a purpose. And you have been built by God to do certain things. Not the same things that I do. I don't do the same things you do. But God has given you a gift. And I'm telling you, chapter 1, verses 6 and 7 says, we no longer are going to live according to a spirit of timidity. We are going to fan into flame the gifts that God has given us, and we are going to move forward as a whole herd, not as one or two, not as 10 or 20, but all 350 of us, all 400 of us, soon all 500. However many God blesses us with here, we're going to move forward. And we're going to be a group that knows that we have been given a spirit of power, love, and discipline. We've got to put it together, and it's got to be now. We've been sensitized for 3 weeks about giving. Some of you have moved off of square one. Some of you have already put things in those barrels. Right now, I got to tell you, I'm still at the stage of getting ready. Okay, I'm not a perfect person. But I'll tell you what, those barrels make a difference for me. Another one of my small gifts, one I don't exercise very often, giving. And it's one that I need to exercise more because I have the gift. I've been gifted. I have the opportunity. And now it is time for me to move off of square one. Now I'm going to restate that we have a spirit of power, love, and discipline. Because I want you to be an open range Christian. That's what it says in those small letters up there. You got to take point. You kind of quit waiting for somebody to make it a big old wide path so that you can follow it, so that you know what you're doing. You and I, we have to start the path today. We have to get out of our pews and get on the road. There's lots of things that need to be done, and you and I are responsible for them. And we have got to go. Take point. Power. The second one is live in the present. You can't talk about what you were as a church 20 years ago. You can't talk about what it was like 50 years ago. And you can't talk about what it's going to be in the future. All of those things are suppositions, or they're bemoaning, or they're self-aggrandizing. What are you doing today? Live in the present. Power and love. Love doesn't happen in the past. And love doesn't happen in the future. When does it happen? You know, it happens right now, in the present. You can't have a spirit of power and love if you're not living in the present. If you're living in the past, you've got to get rid of the past. If you're living in the future, you've got to let go of that. And you need to live in the present. And here it is. We have a spirit of power, love, and discipline. Well, that D is a decision maker. Discipline means you got to decide about yourself. Are you going to be a disciple of Jesus? Or are you going to be a pew sitter for the rest of your life? You've got to decide. God already decided. He said he gave us this spirit. It's powerful, it's full of love, and it's full of discipline. And all you got to do is step into it, fan it to flame, and it's going to make a difference in your life. But you've got to decide. You're going to be a disciple? Not up to me. Okay, here's the crux. Church pews are like fences. We were talking about open range Christian. Well, it's possible that we live in a fenced-in Christianity type of situation. If you look at our auditorium, how many exits do we have? How many people can see us from from the street? Does it say we're enclosed or does it say we're open? You know, it's really hard to overcome a building, but it's doable with this kind of spirit. You can look at your pew as something good because it gives us comfort while we're listening to a message, but it also can become a barrier. My suggestion to you is to get off the fence. Stop wondering what God's going to do. Take the first step and get out there and find out. Quit worrying about what tomorrow's going to bring. Act today. Get the Spirit of God active in your life. Fan it into flame. Get the gifts rolling. Get your discipline in order and love as many people as you possibly can. And then you'll understand the letter that Paul wrote to 2 Timothy. And only then. Where are you at? Need to make a new decision? Well, I hope so. Because it's time for the herd to move on to its purpose. Open range cowboys, they say it would take about 10 to 12 to run about 2,500 head of cattle. Not so in a church. You got to have a few more than that to run that many people. But the cowboys are there to preserve the herd. They learn to lasso, they learn to shoot, they learn to ride their horses, and they went where angels feared to tread, to use a phrase. Whatever was needed, they put their life on the line for it. And many of the men who were cowboys died along the way, saving the cattle. Now here it is. Today is a good day to die for the sake of Christ. You can give your life up to Him and He will keep it. Even if you lose it, He will bless you with eternity. But you've got to believe it. And you have to fan into flame the Spirit, the gift that He has given. No one else can. We may encourage. We may try to give incentive, but it's up to you. You're going to join the herd? I pray that you do. As always, if there's anybody here who hasn't learned about Jesus or has a desire to learn about Jesus, we have elders and preachers that are ready, and members that are ready to teach you at a moment's notice. And so you can talk to anybody in this congregation and they'll get you the opportunity to learn. If you're ready to be baptized, like I'm thinking we may have one here this morning, well, the reason you do that is because Jesus is Lord. We learned that in our Bible class this morning. We learned that Jesus being Lord, He has called us to a new life, that we have to die to the old life and raise up and live in the new life. That comes through the death, burial, and resurrection of baptism. Now, if you're ready for that and for that commitment, then we would ask you to come forward as we stand and we sing.